All right, let's turn our focus to this now. Two-time Emmy nominee Loyiso Gola will host a comedy show at the Emperor's Palace next Friday. Gola is promising his audience a hilarious journey exploring the different impact of cultural moments in South Africa and around the world. He joins us now to speak a little bit more about what we can expect. Good to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And Happy Human Rights Day.
Oh, yeah.
There's that also.
There's that, yeah.
We have a lot going on, right?
Absolutely.
We have a potential vet increase. PEPFAR funding has been taken. Trump says very bad things happening in South Africa.
Yes.
We've got other guys going there, continuing that entire misinformation that is going on. You decide, I'm going to have a night of laughter. Why do you think it's appropriate when we're going through so much?
It's always appropriate to laugh at stuff because some of the stuff is not, you know what's, all the stuff is happening, but for me, the most exciting thing and the most thing I fear the most is just being 40. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
in the midst of all that, we're also growing old.
It's like people go through actual stuff and sometimes you need someone to consolidate your life journeys.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who are on the same life journey as me. And yeah, so I have very specific things that are happening to my life that I want to share to the world that pertain sometimes to the rest of the world. And you know, it's just funny to be in one room and for us to just gather and laugh at what's going on.
What is it about 40 that has got you going?
What
just happened?
I feel I am becoming out of touch, but slowly. It's not like, it's very gradual. Like weird things get to me, like I find that like when I was in my 20s, you had to be at the airport to check in. Right? Do you remember that?
Yes.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
You had to be actually there. You had to have hand over your stuff and then, oh, I'm checked in. Now you can check in at home, sleeping, and miss the flight while you're checking. So it's like that kind of stuff. So while you're not checked in, you're really not. So my brain is still stuck in that. Well, I'm not checked in. Pronouns, all those things that are happening now. People can identify as whatever. But I'm not saying that to slate Gen Z. I'm not slating Gen Z. I think Gen Z is great. I think Gen Z is teaching us that sometimes life is for living. Life is not just a production situation. Right. So they're like, no. Some of this time is actually mine.
Critical time.
And I appreciate that about Gen Z.
How does that change in society affect your creative process?
What the change of, well, listen, the thing that I understood at a very young age is that change is the most guaranteed thing. So you always have to anticipate change. So everybody who's kind of fixated in their ways are the people that always have like a tough time adapting. I'm not one of those people. I'm constantly trying to figure out where do we move? What are we moving to next? And some things make sense and some things don't make sense. Like NFTs never made sense to me. I was like, what? This doesn't make sense. I've got art that's, what are you talking about? Doesn't make sense. And then there's things that make sense and they help us go forward. And so for me, I'm a highly adaptive human being. And in my adaptiveness, I find a way. So I'm not stuck in my ways.
The expulsion of the U.S. ambassador, South Africa U.S. ambassador, does it make sense to you?
You know what my favorite thing about Donald Trump's second term? He is doing what we thought Jacob Zuma would do in his second term. He's like, oh, yeah. So it's so bizarre. So I am so, like, everything he does, I'm like, oh, that is so bizarre. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say anything, and I'm expelled from the U.S. because things can start off small and just become the most viral thing. But I do want to say to the people who want to move to America, because there's 67,000 applicants, you are not ready for America, especially if you lived in Bloemfontein all your life. Now you want to live in San Francisco. Take it easy. Move to a bigger city. You can't just jump from Bloemfontein or Kokstad straight to San Francisco. It's going to be too much for your little tiny Bloemfontein brain. So find another small town, go to Kansas or whatever. And I think like these people who think they are ready for America, they really actually know. America is going to shock your burki. Oh, it's going to shock them.
What was your biggest shock from stand-up stages here at home to global screens?
Listen, I've always, I don't know. I mean, I've just always, like, I moved to Joburg when I was 19. I've always lived in a big city. I lived in Cape Town. I grew up in Cape Town, moved to Joburg. Then I moved temporarily to London, and I'm always in big cities. So if you're a big city person, you're never shocked by much. Nothing really shocks you. Like you'll be walking down the street and someone is carrying a defibrillator, and you're like, okay, that's what happens in like London and New York are just like those. So I think like Joburg lives in that spectrum of a city where it's very hard to shock you, like, and you just have to adapt. Like the Joburg I know of 20 years ago is very different. Yeah. Very, 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 very different.
You got TikTok, you got influencers, you've got all sorts of things that are going on now in this space that you're in comedy. We always speak about reforms in politics and in the economy. Do you think there are reforms that are needed?
Listen, I really do not care if someone wants to be an influencer and do stand-up comedy. I think everybody must understand, if you're in an industry which is a low-hanging fruit, i.e. comedy, music, acting, those are low. NASA doesn't have these issues. Now, there's no one at NASA going...
It's a specialist
It's a very specific thing. You need to have a certain level of skill. So if you're in an industry where anybody can just waltz in, you have to deal with the consequences of that. And complaining about it it's a very futile exercise. So NASA, they don't complain about this in the accountancy industry or plumbing or whatever. It's only this specific one. Why is that the case? I don't care. I don't really care. I know no matter how big the industry gets, there's always a place for me if I've got what it takes. Yeah. That's it.
You don't have the challenge of wanting to find relevance in a particular space?
No. That's not a real thing for me. Like, that's a crazy idea to try to be relevant for like 20, 15 years. That's crazy. Just do what you do, and sometimes you'll be in a #1 movie, sometimes you'll make a movie. It doesn't matter. Just enjoy the journey. Stop stressing about what other people are doing.
Yeah. I heard other people saying, you've already mentioned it, and Donald Trump has been a shock to even comedians, that you guys have kind of been filtered. You're not quite sure what to say about him at this particular
Because
point.
He completes the joke. Remember, before that, you had to formulate this idea into a joke. But when he says that, when in his mind, definitively, he's saying there's a white genocide in South Africa, you're like, that is a bizarre concept that cannot be turned into a joke. It already exists as satire, as a thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's complete. The idea is complete already as a joke. So it's a very hard. It's an easy time in terms of observation, but it's a hard time in terms of formulating a joke about it, because the whole idea is a joke, right? I mean, a guy I used to watch going, "You're fired," is now the leader of the free world in inverted
and inspiring everybody.
Do you understand what I'm saying? It's so absurd. If I was writing a sketch in 1999, this is how I would write it, right? Yeah, but now it's real life, and you're like, "Oh, this is a complete joke. Where do I take it from here? It's done as a joke. I just have to see it through. This is what we're living in. It's exciting. I just love craziness. Maybe I'm an anarchist at heart."
Night of Laughter. Any new material coming up? What's
of course. I write constantly, so I'm always like really engaging the issues at hand, but I'm always, my life takes center stage in terms of, this is where I'm living right now, this is what I'm going through. It's like, every time I play football, I pull something, and this never used to happen in my 30s. I run for like 4 kilometers, and then I need to rest for 3 weeks. It's mad, So I think there's a lot of people who are going through that, and let's go through it together and just laugh. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's what comedy is for. We all going through this. Yeah, and I think let's just gather in a room and laugh about it. That's what I think.
We appreciate you. We look forward to next week Friday.
I'm very thankful. I never thought in my life I would sit here, because I'm always watching people talk absolute nonsense sitting here. And I was like, when is my turn to talk nonsense? And here I am.
We appreciate you. We thank you for coming. It was nice having you here.